Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the land acknowledgement. Councillor McDonald.
Good morning, everyone. The lands we know today as the Township of Centre Wellington have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Centre Wellington, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Centre Wellington remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Addendums or corrections to the agenda? None. Disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Delegations? Okay. Consideration of reports. 6.1, demolition and cleanup of 25 West Mill Street, Elora, and we have a report from Dan Wilson. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. This report is in relation to 25 West Mill Street, Elora, which is known as the Elora Green Space. The township leases this property from Suncor Energy Inc. We are currently 2 years into a 10-year lease extension that was signed, that took effect January 1st of 2023. Not too long ago, on February 24th, the structure, which is located on the northwest corner of the property, partially collapsed. Shortly after the collapse, the area was secured and made safe, but there is a pressing need to clean up the site as soon as possible. We've had multiple conversations with both the neighboring property owner, which is Cat Florence Canada Company Limited, and the owner of the property, Suncor Energy Inc., about the process to do that. The interesting part to all of this is that the demolition itself, part of the debris collapsed onto Cat Florence's property, which is former Francis Lane, as well. The structure itself is connected to one of Cat Florence's buildings at 43 West Mill Street. So there was a vested interest to have Cat Florence part of the overall conversation. In front of you in the report is a draft temporary access and demolition agreement to take care of either a full or partial demolition of the structure. In that, Cat Florence Canada Limited would be responsible for the demolition, including all costs incurred. They have, in addition to what was already mentioned, they have the best access point to clean up the site through Francis Lane and their other laneway coming off of West Mill Street. And we didn't want this to create any damage to our green space. Thankfully, Cat Florence has somebody on hand that can do the work. We just need to sign the agreement and get a demolition permit in place. The agreement itself is fairly self-explanatory, but I know we have Kevin Thompson, our solicitor from SV Law, on the meeting virtually, and if he has any follow-up comments before we open up to questions, I'll turn the floor over to Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. I have nothing further to add in addition to Dan's comments, but I'm able to take any questions if there are any from council.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, open to council for questions and comments. Councillor McDonald.
To you, Mayor Waters. Thank you for the update, Dan. I did ask the question of your office, who actually is responsible for that building in particular, and was it being inspected? I didn't really get a fulsome answer, so that's why I'm asking it now.
Through Mayor Waters, through the lease with Suncor, we are responsible for the structure as a township, but it was not being used in any way by the township or any other party. So I don't believe it was being inspected.
I just want to let everyone know I did have a constituent ask me at Christmas time if they could use that building, and I directed them to the township. I am grateful that nothing was done. We're seeing barns fall down with the heavy snow, so this was no surprise.
Any other comments, questions from council? Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. It's just, I can understand why Cat Florence in the agreement is wanting to pay for all the demolition costs and everything that are associated with that for protection of their building, to be able to have a timely removal of all the materials from the site as well. What I don't agree with is the reimbursement for legal and engineering costs, to have Cat Florence Canada reimburse us for our own engineering and out-of-pocket legal expenses. I just feel that to keep the lines clear and to not muddy the waters, that perhaps we should cover our own costs for things, since it is also our lease down there as well.
Through Mayor Waters, if council wants to make an amendment to the agreement, we can do so. But as of right now, the agreement states that Cat Florence would pay for our legal fees.
Any further comments or questions on as it relates to that? Or is the feeling is it maybe do a little bit of elaboration on that, or what is your concern that way?
Just because just the division of public and private, and also public and private money, and also our I guess place in the community as well, so that there's no insinuation of influence. Just that we cover our own. It's legal and engineering, and also when you're looking at different costs, then who has ownership of that if they've paid for it? Like if we pay for our own engineering, then we have ownership of engineering, even though it is our own engineer that will be on site down there. It's just so that there's clarification and that there's division between public and private money and public and private jobs, like not jobs, but work.
Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, along that same line, I do think it is important to be clear where the funds are coming from, but we don't actually know how much it is yet, correct? Okay. But I tend to agree a little bit. We could maybe discuss it again afterwards, but I think on this point, it would be good to divide it up between public and private. I do want to commend Cat Florence on the fact that they've been involved with this, and thank you for doing that wholly. And I am concerned about their building, how it is tied to the fallen structure. I drove by there a few times now, and I walked it, and it does look concerning. So we won't know until it actually starts. We do have some of the best masonry here, and I also want to commend them for the people that they do hire. So thank you.
Councillor Wilton, did I see your hand?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Waters. And yeah, I would agree with Councillor Jefferson that it would be nice to keep the lines a little separate and cover our own costs in terms of engineering and legal, keep it separate from that public and private piece. So I think that she's raised a valid point there.
Dan?
Just a point, if we're amending the agreement, I would need a second resolution passed to for council to authorize the township costs to be funded from the general capital reserve.
Okay. Any other comments or questions as it relates to this item? Okay, so in terms of the recommendation, I would read, I'm looking for staff and here, I'd read the existing recommendation, and we do sort of an amendment or addition to that recommendation. Is that correct? Oh, I can see you're working on this right now. Okay.
If you have consensus, we can just add it.
Yeah.
As a staff to the staff recommendation.
Okay. So what I'll do, if council's good, I'll read the recommendation, and then we'll see if we've got a lot of head nods there, and then we'll go from there. Okay. That the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to sign a temporary access and demolition agreement on behalf of the Township of Centre Wellington for the demolition and cleanup of the structure located at 25 Mill Street, Laura, and that the township costs be funded from a general capital reserve. Do you have any comments or questions, or is that looking fine for council? Sort of to cover off, I see anything from staff as well, just before I call for a vote? Dan.
Just a
Okay. Just a point, when you were reading that resolution, it should be for the CAO to finalize and execute the agreement, because there might be a few tweaks to be made to the agreement between now and signage, and we just want to make sure that that's incorporated in the resolution.
Mayor Waters, I think Councillor Wilton has a...
Councillor Wilton.
No, I was fine. I just couldn't hear Dan, but I think he repeated what he said. So I think it's all good now.
Why don't I read this all again so we're all clear? That the Council of Township of Centre Wellington authorize the Chief Administration Officer to finalize and execute a temporary access and demolition agreement on behalf of the Township of Centre Wellington for the demolition and cleanup of the structure located at 25 West Mill Street, Elora, and that the township costs be funded from the General Capital Reserve.
Mayor Waters?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have the right version of the agenda, because my recommendation reads a little bit differently, and it delegates authority to the CAO to finalize and execute a temporary access and demolition agreement, generally in accordance with the draft agreement appended to report. So I feel like what you just read didn't quite say that. And I'm also curious, maybe we should specify engineering and legal costs for the second part of the resolution or the recommendation. You've been reading it as just costs, so I think maybe it should just be specific to legal and engineering.
Yeah, I do have one question as it relates to, I would think that some of the engineering costs may be even related to to Cat Florence property. So I'm not sure we want to get into that. It's sort of like trying to separate both, because the building was physically attached to Cat Florence. I would think that there would be an interest on their part to make sure that everything is fine on their building, but it's not for us to that's what I'm concerned is we get pulled into that. And so how do you divide that? I see Dan with his hand up, so I'll let Dan speak to that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Waters. In the agreement, we refer to the township's consulting engineer, and we have a specific consulting engineer acting on our behalf. So maybe it's just a cost associated with the township's consulting engineer plus legal fees.
Yes, that sounds reasonable. Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mayor Waters, who is the consulting engineer? Is that our standby Burnside? No.
It's Tacoma.
Tacoma. Okay, yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I agree. I think, when it comes down to the costs, they'll be billing for who did what, and we'll just absorb the costs on the township's behalf. I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
Okay, so we're just, is Jen, did I see your hand up? Oh, no, okay. So we're just working out the wording here, and then we'll be back to you in a moment.
Okay, I think I got it.
Okay. Bear Bear with me here. I'll read this again. That the Council of Township of Centre Wellington delegates authority to the Chief Administrative Officer to finalize and execute temporary access and demolition agreement on behalf of the Township of Centre Wellington for the demolition and cleanup of the structure located at 25 West Mill Street, Laura, generally in accordance with the draft agreement appended to Report CAO 2025-03, and that the Township associated legal and engineering costs be funded from the General Capital Reserve. Does that sound better to everyone? Heads are nodding. Okay. Yeah, yes, Pat.
I apologize. I was following along with the resolution. I hate to ask again. Can you just read it one more time?
I can do that. And that the Council of the Township of Centre Wellington delegates authority to the Chief Administrative Officer to finalize and execute a temporary access and demolition agreement on behalf of the Township of Centre Wellington for the demolition and cleanup of the structure located at 25 Mill Street, Elora, generally in accordance with the draft agreement appended to Report CAO 2025-03, and that the Township associated legal and engineering costs be funded from the General Capital Reserve. Go ahead.
I believe council's conversation was that it would be the township's consulting engineer, as it's specified in the agreement. Just that was my only, I'm sure if other have changes, but that's what I caught.
And I saw your hand, Councillor Wilton, as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Pat Newsom there that I think we need to be specific about the township's consulting engineer.
Okay, so the first part looks fine, and I'll read the last part of it. And that the Township associated legal and consulting engineer costs be funded from the General Capital Reserves. I think that covers that now. Okay. If there's no any further comments or questions from council, I'm going to ask for a mover for that. Councillor Craddock, seconder on that. Councillor McDonald, any further comments or questions as it relates to that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's so moved. Okay, thank you.
We don't need a bylaw because the chief has been delegated authority to the Chief Administrative Officer.
Okay, we don't need a bylaw because that's been passed off to our CAO and staff on that. And then confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to confirm the actions of council, recommendation that bylaw 2025-20 be to confirm the proceeding of council at its special meeting held March 3rd, 2025, be introduced a first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Adams, seconder on that. Councillor Craddock, any further comments or questions? Seeing none? Oh, yes, go ahead, Councillor Wilton.
Thank you. Just a process question on the agenda I'm looking at, and again, I feel like I might have the wrong version. We had 7.1, the bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a temporary access and demolition agreement. So that was not necessary? Just curious.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Waters, that's required when the mayor and clerk sign agreements. So this time it's delegated to the CAO. I must admit that the agenda was put out quickly on Friday, and we had to push it out with the addition of the agreement. And my minutes were done before I left on Friday, so that's why there's a little bit of confusion. So I apologize for that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so I've read that recommendation. Did we have a first and seconder on that?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor? So moved. Okay. Adjournment. I would have someone propose. Yes, Councillor McDonald, seconder, Councillor Wilton. All those, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjournment? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You folks have a good day. Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Take care.